Hello, online pipe community. Ethan, parsimonious piper. Been a couple of weeks, but once more, I am joined by,
Hutter Piper.
and we are going to dive into Screwtape letters number 25. Well, it's my turn to read, so without any further ado, let's dive in. My dear Wormwood, the real trouble about the set your patient is living in is that it is merely Christian. They all have individual interests, of course, but the bond remains mere Christianity. What we want, if men become Christians at all, is to keep them in the state of mind I call Christianity and, you know, Christianity and the crisis, Christianity and the new psychology, Christianity and the new order, Christianity and faith healing, Christianity and psychical research, Christianity and vegetarianism, Christianity and spelling reform. If they must be Christians, let them at least be Christians with a difference. Substitute for the faith itself some fashion with the Christian coloring. Work on their horror of the same old thing. The horror of the same old thing is one of the most valuable passions we have produced in the human heart, an endless source of heresies in religion, folly in counsel, infidelity in marriage, and inconstancy in friendship. The humans live in time and experience reality successively. To experience much of it, therefore, they must experience many different things. In other words, they must experience change. And since they need change, the enemy, being a hedonist at heart, has made change pleasurable to them, just as he has made eating pleasurable. But since he does not wish them to make change any more than eating, an end in itself, he has balanced the love of change in them by a love of permanence. He has contrived to gratify both tastes together in the very world he has made, by that union of change and permanence which we call rhythm. He gives them the seasons, each season different, yet every year the same, so that spring is always felt as a novelty, yet always as the recurrence of an immemorial theme. He gives them in his church a spiritual year. They change from a fast to a feast, but it's the same feast as before. Now, just as we pick out and exaggerate the pleasure of eating to produce gluttony, so we pick out this natural pleasantness of change and twist it into a demand for absolute novelty. This demand is entirely our workmanship. If we neglect our duty, men will be not only contented, but transported by the mixed novelty and familiarity of snowdrops this January, sunrise this morning, plum pudding this Christmas. Children, until we have taught them better, will be perfectly happy with the seasonal round of games in which conkers succeed hopscotch as regularly as autumn follows summer. Only by our incessant efforts is the demand for infinite or unrhythmical change kept up. This demand is valuable in various ways. In the first place, it diminishes pleasure while increasing desire. The pleasure of novelty is, by its very nature, more subject than any other to the law of diminishing returns. And continued novelty costs money, so that the desire for it spells avarice or unhappiness or both. And again, the more rapacious this desire, the sooner it must eat up all the innocent sources of pleasure and pass on to those the enemy forbids. Thus, by inflaming the horror of the same old thing, we have recently made the arts, for example, less dangerous to us than perhaps they have ever been. Lowbrow and highbrow artists alike being now daily drawn into fresh and still fresh excesses of lasciviousness, unreason, cruelty, and pride. Finally, the desire for novelty is indispensable if we are to produce fashions or vogues. The use of fashions in thought is to distract the attention of men from their real dangers. We direct the fashionable outcry of each generation against those vices of which it is least in danger, and fix its approval on the virtue nearest to that vice which we are trying to make endemic. The game is to have them all running about with fire extinguishers whenever there's a flood, and all crowding to that side of the boat which is already nearly gunwale under. Thus, we make it fashionable to expose the dangers of enthusiasm at the very moment when they are all really becoming worldly and lukewarm. A century later, when we are really making them all Byronic and drunk with emotion, the fashionable outcry is directed against the dangers of the mere understanding. Cruel ages are put on their guard against sentimentality, feckless and idle ones against respectability, lecherous ones against puritanism, and whenever all men are really hastening to be slaves or tyrants, we make liberalism the prime bogey. But the greatest triumph of all is to elevate this horror of the same old thing into a philosophy so that nonsense in the intellect may reinforce corruption in the will. It is here that the general evolutionary or historical character of modern European thought, partly our work, comes in so usefully. The enemy loves platitudes. Of a proposed course of action, he wants men, so far as I can see, to ask very simple questions. Is it righteous? Is it prudent? Is it possible? Now, if we can keep men asking, is it in accordance with the general movement of our time? Is it progressive or reactionary? Is this the way that history is going? They will neglect the relevant questions. And the questions they do ask are, of course, unanswerable, for they do not know the future, and what the future will be depends very largely on just those choices which they now invoke the future to help them make. As a result, while their minds are buzzing in this vacuum, we have the better chance to slip in and bend them to the action we have decided on. And great work has already been done. Once they knew that some changes were for the better and others for the worse, and others again indifferent, we have largely removed this knowledge. For the descriptive adjective unchanged, we have substituted the emotional adjective stagnant. We have trained them to think of the future as a promised land which favored heroes attain, not as something which everyone reaches at the rate of 60 minutes an hour, whatever he does, whoever he is. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Thank you, Ethan. Lewis presents in this letter permanence and change. And how does Screwtape want to teach Wormwood to make change the novelty in that which is sought, and yet things change so that we can find joy and ultimately happiness in the rootedness of the eternal, which doesn't change. Whether we want to find the happiness, the goodness, the joy, those things that are rooted in eternity, we can taste in the change of the here and now and be able to enjoy it. As he mentions, even with the seasons, how we have the permanence of 4 seasons, especially if you live more in the north, east of the U.S., and yet they're the same. And I definitely can see where Lewis comes into that novelty of the change. And I can especially I've been up in the Northeast here in upstate New York for 4 years. I originally born in Florida, and we don't have the seasons like you would up here. We don't. It's basically summer and less summer. Um, so you'd hear, I might hear on the TV or somebody from the north who's visiting or has a winter place in Florida about, oh yeah, fall begins here, winter begins here, and that really never meant anything because you didn't experience it as you would. But now being up here, I love the seasons. I love the changing. Um, I love the fact that we're going to get winter, and some people will kind of get on me up here because I think some people are taught to quote dislike winter, and yet even when winter can drag on, I love the fact that everybody's going to get excited when spring comes, and there's an excitement in the air, and there's just such an enjoyment to that, and it's helped me appreciate the fact that how does the changing of our life and what we enjoy within that, whether it's good food, seasons, the changing of church seasons, religious seasons. For some, it might be football season, sports season. You know, it's how can the change and the excitement of the change help us to be more rooted in the permanence, to help us to be point to and to appreciate the rootedness of what is good and how the different fact that things change is good, but but how can I be more rooted in the permanence of the good instead of the distraction of needing a change all the time? And we've talked before, whether directly or in the episodes, or indirectly, about church services, and that how sometimes the leaders of church, in whatever way that might be, how do we have the next change and the better music and the better this, because we got to keep everybody's attention, and uh, even our movies, and how you know how did they need to blow things more up, more blow up more things and so forth in movies, because you got to keep that attention going. And then when they you could take a good movie, and then by the time they get to the third run of the sequels, they've just blown up way too many things, and it's like they just miss something that's there. And it's that, and the letter really kind of made me think about how easy it can be getting distracted in just the change, instead of realizing is what is the change, what am I enjoying in the difference, in the change, how does God want me to be rooted in what the change is pointing to, what it's giving me, the eternal rootedness of goodness, of happiness. So, and especially, and that'll be, and I know you did a whole series on Mere Christianity, and he obviously purposely puts in Mere Christianity. So I think with that, I'm gonna punt it back.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Lewis talks about this change, and like you said, it's the seeking change that becomes the idol. When the change itself is everything that we're seeking, that's where we get distracted from the good that is at the base of it. He talks about how this has been used to create all kinds of follies um, in our appetites, the constant desire to eat something new and for whatever I'm eating to be interesting. It leads us directly into gluttony. This notion, and you hear it sadly most often from people who are not married and have not experienced marriage. Why would I want to have sex with the same person for the rest of my life? um, uh, the notion that we have to have change in order to enjoy something or in order to experience it fully is at the root of all kinds of these societal problems. Now, circling back to the beginning, when he does mention mere Christianity, this is obviously no accident, because in the book Mere Christianity, he talks about stripping Christianity down to its core. He's not belittling Christianity when he says mere Christianity. He is saying what is that basic core that we can all call Christianity. And Screwtape wants to do exactly the opposite. He doesn't want Wormwood's patient to be able to focus on those things that are the core of Christianity. He wants to always have it be Christianity and. You brought up a really good one, Christianity and music, worship music. In today's particularly non-Catholic churches, in the Protestant churches, there has been a war going on, so to speak, for a couple of decades over are we going to sing the old hymns or are we going to sing a constant stream of new stuff? And this focus on having a constant stream of new stuff is a distraction away from the core of worship. And Screwtape couldn't be more thrilled. Now, does that mean we shouldn't have new music? Of course not. Of course we should. But the problem becomes when the focus gets to be so much on that constantly needing to be new and fresh and not enjoying and benefiting from the depth of some of what came before. So that's just that's one example in the modern church of where we have followed exactly down this road of the fear of something being the same. It applies to so many things in our lives, and he correctly points out that eventually what you come up with is diminishing returns. And the more you do something, the less you enjoy exactly that thing, unless you are focused on the enjoyment of that thing. If what you are looking for is some new variety, eventually you're going to get bored with what you're doing and you're going to look for something that is bigger, better, more extreme. And that very rarely ends well.
And even I think of pipe smoking and tobacco smoking, and I'm thinking now that I'm a year into serious uh, pipe smoking, um, you know, I have to say I have some nostalgic admiration for the codger, and but I'm not a codger uh, in its definition, and um, I look at some guys will pretty much smoke a certain blend or so forth, and there's an admiration to it. Maybe because I'm not there. It's really the last month or two, and this isn't just to blow smoke up your. I don't know if that'd be the right term since we're doing it together, but a part of it is because of you, Ethan. That the last month or two, I have been at least trying for a week to dedicate to a blend. I'd say over the last year, I realized over the last year, give or take, I only, let's just say a 2 ounce tin, I only finished one blend.
Hmm.
I have smoked 60 to probably 100 blends. I have them open. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing in the sense that I've appreciated over kind of like a flat surface, but now I realize I need to be a little more rooted in a blend to truly be appreciated. And I'm in that place of my pipe smoking to say, you know what, you try a lot, start to at least weekly get to know a blend and be a little more, maybe have a little more wisdom and experience, and there's something important to that.
Yeah, I think most of us have fallen into the trap. I know I did, of going out and buying one or two tins of everything we saw, and and winding up with a stock. I hesitate to call it a cellar because it's not. I think of a cellar as being more deliberate. Having a stock of tobaccos that is a mile wide and 110 deep, and who knows if I will ever get around to trying all of those blends. So yeah, we can, lest to anyone think we are pointing fingers at others. uh, this is one where I myself am definitely guilty of having fallen into that. Now I have dropped off my tobacco purchases almost entirely, with the exception of a couple of purchases at shows. You know, that's not to pat myself on the back. It's just to say I recognized the peril that I was in and needed to stop. Um, it's a fun hobby, but it can become obsessive, and that's true with anything. And that's exactly where Screwtape is taking this notion of change, that There's always something bigger, better out there that we can experience and that we need to experience. The kids, as they say, have an acronym for it: FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Mm.
That if I'm not doing something new and exciting and trying it, then somehow I am missing it. Well, unfortunately, if that's our attitude, then a lot of times what we really miss is the joy and beauty of the constancy of truly valuable things that God provides us with. And we will constantly flit from one thing to another, never truly satisfied, because there's always something out there that we haven't tried yet and that we haven't done yet. And again, this is not an argument for complacency, far from it, but it is. Paul says that he's learned to be satisfied no matter what his circumstances are, whether he's in prison or free, whether he's got plenty or nothing. And that's because his focus is where it should be. And that's where Screwtape wants to get us off. He does not want us to keep our focus uh, on God and on our relationship with Him through Christ. And so we will be dissatisfied with life as long as we're just bouncing from one thing to another.
And with that, that's why I'm thankful for I'm thankful for this series of C.S. Lewis letters, for this for pipe smoking, um, and the fact that there's so many different experiences and so forth, and that's why you know I think of I get back to The Conjure. I think of The Conjure, and you know there I will admit there's a part of me, especially in the beginning, that just thought, wow, how boring. Um, and now, as I'm becoming hopefully a little more experienced and wiser, I don't think that way, because there's a part of me that's like, there is a rooted attribute. There's something there I need I need that's important in my own journey, my own experience, and my own experience with Christ, and even in this wonderful life and hobby, however somebody wants to say it, of pipe smoking.
Mm-hmm. There's a touchstone, an anchor point that we need to be constantly aware of, so that we don't fall into this trap of screw tapes of constantly having to seek novelty. Well, folks, I hope that that has given you some food for thought. It certainly has us. And until we talk with you, hopefully next week, light something you like. Enjoy your afternoon.